again. How are you doing today, Mr. Walker?
I am doing well, thank you.
Outstanding. It's been quite some time since you were last with us, perhaps a year or close to it, perhaps 10 months. Um, you know, the book's out. Everything looks great. The cover looked pretty snazzy. How do you think it went?
I haven't actually heard a whole lot either way about the cover, but I like how it turned out and well, it is a world first cover. It's the first to have all three of the core elements of of the genre I'm hitting on one cover. Something nobody has ever done before. Guy with a laser sword, giant robot, space battleship.
Absolutely. I don't think I've ever seen something like that. Certainly not together. Um, but I appreciate it anyway. So we're a part of well, not me so much, though I do have something in the works that'll have some in it. In the Gundam for Us sort of Space Knight genre, which in itself is a worthy name. But could you tell us a bit about that?
Well, within our little group of science fiction authors who decided to make our own giant robot stories, Brian D. Meyer holds the end that is very much more of the real robot end. That he's very much, if you're a Gundam guy who wants more Gundam, he's your guy. And then Roland Yancey's on the other end, who's very much on the super robot end. And that's all I'm going to say. He can explain his own stuff.
And he
I
has
sit
in the
between the
past.
two. Yes. I sit between the two because I have both super robots and real robots. And I originally started with Star Knight as my reaction to seeing what Nick Cole and Jason Onspach did with, when they created Galaxy Edge. It was originally my Star Wars, not Star Wars stuff. And it became a giant robots property after I wrote the original short story, which appeared in the Pulp Rev Sampler, the Ghost Fist Gambit. Um, I wrote Ghost Fist Gambit pretty much as my Star Wars pastiche, and I did it pretty quick because I did it pretty quick, and it shows. But I'm still proud of it because a lot of the stuff that is now in Star Knight was and is there, and since then, no. Between the time that I did Ghost of Gambit and put out Reavers of the Void, that's when I added in the giant robots. I fleshed out Galactic Christendom, and started really working on the world building aspect that really isn't blatant in the book, but it's there.
Hmm. I did catch some of the world building within Star Knight Saga, and I appreciated it. It wasn't like, it's only like a 250-page book or so, so it didn't like. I'm kind of a door stopper guy, but it was much appreciated every time it showed up.
Yeah, I've come to take world building for most writers. I think it's probably taken the same way that um, the man who ultimately you can either blame or thank for getting me seriously thinking about this many years before. Scott Lynch, the author of the Gentleman Bastard series, the way he described the Arthurian mythos is it's best done as a spice. A little dab will do ya.
Hmm.
And I've come to take world building the same way. I like to imply rather than outright state, the way George Lucas did in the original trilogy, and the way you get the sense of a greater, larger world with a larger story when you read the old stuff. You pick
Hmm.
up a Princess of Mars, and you know by the time John Carter meets Deja Thoris, you've already got um, you have this implied depth of a world, and you're not looking at a very thick book
Nope.
regardless of what printing you're in. And I think that level of efficiency is something I think most authors should strive for. Um,
I think it helped that he did dedicate some time to John Carter learning about the world in a slower
mhm,
fashion. Like a lot of authors, they kind of just throw them in, and they aren't in I want to say a powerless state like John Carter was.
mhm.
John Carter didn't know the language, so he spent 3 months learning the language. Um,
Yeah.
and you can do a lot with that as an author if the
Mhm.
situation allows for it.
Yep. And knowing your medium helps.
Hmm.
Knowing your medium helps, and knowing um, how the medium of the written word, especially in prose, differs from that not only of other shorter or much longer prose media, epic poetry, for example, differs. Since we're in an audiovisual culture, that's primarily what you're going to be dealing with competing media. So, how does visual shorthand translate to the written word? That's something I think about a lot. Uh, two two YouTube channels I frequent every couple of weeks. There's a every every scene every scene a painting and lessons from the screenplay, visual direction and screenwriting, respectively. These are not neither of these are prose writing. This is not novel writing,
Mm,
and blindly applying them, as Brian Niemeier has said elsewhere on his blog and in other places, is a category error. Just
yep.
blind. But if you get the principle behind what a given technique in screenwriting or in visual storytelling is, and you try to apply the principle, then I think you have a better basis for comparison and application. And that's what I try to do.
Yeah.
And having read my editor's notes, I've succeeded not as much as I would have liked, but I did. I did here and there. In particular, I've been Brian has praised me for my scenes regarding the duels,
Mm.
and
Which I
uh,
absolutely agree with them. The final duel is especially spectacular, but also the smaller fights in between there. I still think back on when Cretan went berserk, or when this or that happened, which of course you must, read for yourself. I'll
mhm,
include a link when I post this video, of course. I still think back on them. I still think how well they were done, and very much a thief as an author, and I always try to improve that which I steal. And it's like just taking those right bits, just
mhm.
right.
I'm a big, when I this came up on Twitter when we were talking about it, and that's when I mentioned that that was my background as a Renaissance Festival participant. Um, I wasn't juggling, I wasn't hawking things in a shop. I worked as a volunteer for the University of Minnesota Fencing Club, and I didn't deal in the fencing. I was in the ring as a ringmaster, so I had to watch, and I would listen to the actual sport fencers and their coach, who all of whom were acquaintances or friends of mine eventually. And I listened to them and I watched them. And the balloon fencing we were using is based on German Schlager fencing, which is a saber style from the late 19th century that would eventually translate over into a related stick style that was used in the or up through the early 20th century, up to the First World War.
Hmm.
And that is very much all about wrist movement and footwork, because your target area is a pair of balloons on either side of the on either side of the mask. So you and I tried to remember those basic ideas, which is you watch the hands and you watch and it's all about movement of the feet. So that's why I try when I write the duels. It's about three things: who's moving their hands, and who's trying to psych the other guy out and how. Um, when that translates to firefights, it's still a lot of movement, a lot of watching, and a lot of situational awareness. And that translates into giant robot combat because my real robots and my super robots, even though the control mechanisms can be very different, the principles behind being a successful pilot are very much the same as being a successful fencer, ultimately.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
And the way you explain it, of course, it makes perfect sense because your situational awareness as a pilot is just as important as your situational awareness as a fencer. Which I'll admit, like when I did some fencing, I wasn't too great at, so I always went for, a quick and brutal lunge at the heart. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but then again, I was willing to like put everything into my reach, and being the type of man I was, unless the person was experienced and knew how to deal with a guy who just loves to lunge all the time. Giggity. But
Yeah.
sorry, I couldn't resist. Like it'll like the second somebody knew how to parry me, I was just dead.
Mm-hmm. Um, as far as naval combat goes, uh, the,
Hmm.
the there's making an exciting naval combat scene. It depends on what scale you're looking at. If it's ship to ship, that's essentially a duel, and many of the same dramatic principles apply. When you're talking about fleets, that's different
Hmm.
because um, you're talking about moving huge blocks around, and space is big, really, really big. To
Yep.
quote, to invoke all those hitchhiker guides, memes out there. But uh, the corollary to that is that yes, space is big and therefore and in three dimensions, but past a given mass, you might as well be playing on a tabletop because your massive ships and their massive ships, unless you seriously make the effort to make full use of 3D space, you are really just two blocks trying to pound each other.
Yep.
And that reduces a three-dimensional environment to a two-dimensional situation. And we see that, I'm not the only guy in science fiction to do this. Um, the man behind Legend of the Galactic Heroes is on record
Hmm.
as using land battles as his naval combat model because of how big his fleets are. And
I was actually thinking of him as you were describing the block tactics.
mhm. um, but I do try to spread the fleets out as much, whenever I think the scene calls for it. Uh, and that's my Lensman influence because E. E. Smith, when you read his naval battles, even as on the small scale that he starts with, in uh, in timeline order, not in publication order,
Mm.
with Triplanetary. Once they get big enough, um, the idea is that the fleets become like amoebas trying to eat each other, and the way they do it is by spreading their wings in all directions. Englobing is the term,
Yeah.
and the other thing is specific formations are attempted to try to use this shape to direct all of your guns to this direction for whatever
Hmm.
reason. And yeah,
Yeah, and
I know. Yeah.
absolutely agree with that statement.
Hmm.
I was thinking back to the Thrawn trilogy, where Timothy Zahn made use of interdictors to force ships out of space at certain angles. So you could
Yep.
basically send your fleet around to the back of them and hit it in. And even though, like, you say you can have this massive 3D space, that doesn't mean that 3D space is safe. Or that there's a route from A to Z75 behind the enemy
Mm.
fleet from your position, especially if there are rules to your hyperspace travel.
Yep. Um. Now, now, when I started, lining up book two, the book two is not going to have. is not going to have a lot of the same, a lot of the same. We're not going to have a huge naval combat scene. There's going to be naval combat, scenes, but not like they were in Star Night, in Reavers, I should say. For book two, um, there's going to be, you know, my plot outline has one big battleship duel at the climax,
Mm.
and has one big battleship duel, and there's, and I'm going to attempt something in something at the end of Act Two that I've never seen done. I've never seen it done.
Ooh.
I've never heard of anybody try to do this. So somebody may have done it before me, but I've never seen anybody try to do a sword duel in free fall before.
Mm. You
Mm-hmm.
see, usually, I I'm actually thinking about this pretty hard because there's a whole bunch of different things that I've seen done in freefall, but the only thing
Yeah,
I like, if you how much realism? That's a big question.
yeah. How much realism? Well, since this is free fall from from low, basically from barely inside the atmosphere, barely inside the atmosphere on Mars towards not too close to hit the chute, but it's going to be pretty close.
Hmm.
So
No, I can't think of it. The closest thing I can think of is that one dumb Star Trek thing, which was like the
yeah,
only
yeah
vaguely cool thing in the
the
movie.
the first Abrams Trek film, which
Yeah,
had that atmospheric drop onto the drill rig.
but that's not the same at all, really, is it?
No,
Hmm. But
no,
yeah, I can't think of any.
no, and neither can I. The most I can think of are people who grapple one another in free fall for somebody's shoot. That's
Hmm.
usually the context, and that's not a concern here.
Hmm.
Um, no. The other thing is that the something else I don't see very often is very often in contemporary popular fiction outside of spy films. That's that's my caveat. Outside of spy films, I don't see the hero trying to try to outwit the villain with skullduggery.
Hmm.
Um, I'm trying. Book two is going to do that. Roland is actually going to go. Roland is trying to bait my mastermind out of hiding. Out of hiding,
Hmm.
and the mastermind is smart enough to know this is going on, but he's under a constraint. He has to shut up Gabriella somehow, and he still can't kill her. So he's got to find some way to you know he's got to find some way to satisfy his to deal with this liability before Roland gets his win condition. And that's been very interesting to try to write around because it it's almost as if the usual dynamic has been shifted,
Hmm.
and that can be interesting, but if I screw it up, I make the mistake of making my villain too sympathetic, and um, my mastermind needs to be non-sympathetic. Certain of his underlings can be. Um,
Right.
Dashing Jack already has one unapologetic fanboy. Um,
He was pretty cool, and I actually like the whole like sorry, it's been a year since I've read this. What's the name of the main? Not the mastermind, but there was a sister and the brother. What was the name of the brother?
oh, Red Eyes.
Yeah, I actually like that thing with Red Eyes. How he wanted to go out there, recall his sister and stuff like that, but it's like he couldn't, and now it's like a perfect opportunity to swear eternal revenge.
Yeah, and um, for book two, I'm trying to set up what happens to Red Eyes in book three gets set up in book two,
Mm,
which is that Hell's Heart throughout book two is still not able to go FTL, so Red Eyes gets rotated to the backstage. But that doesn't mean his presence isn't felt.
mm-hmm,
Um, that he doesn't like not being able to act, and he's starting to chafe. He's starting to chafe under he's starting to chafe under his chains to the mastermind. So when he's forced to acquiesce to his master's less than yeah, it's a request, but it's not a request to second Jack to directly under the mastermind for the duration of book two.
mm,
The you know Red Eyes feels it, and but he doesn't know how he's going to retaliate until book two is almost over. When uh, when according to my current plot outline, it's all subject to change. Neither Roland nor the mastermind get what they want, but they both get what they need. Go figure. It's the second. It's a part two of a 3-part arc.
mm,
But um, and what happens in book three, and this has been in my notes since I was in the hospital I started earnestly starting to plot out the entire this entire 3-book arc. um Red Eyes what happens to Red Eyes in book three is that he gets the Garma treatment, and by that I mean he gets the same kind of exit from the story that Garma Zabi does in Mobile Suit Gundam. um yeah. And yes, that's on YouTube. Go look it up, folks. Garmazabi, good friend of Char Aznable. Yeah,
I can't
and
remember that part. He died, didn't he?
he got set up.
Yes.
Yeah, Char sets Garma up to be killed by the White Base crew, and Char does this in order to further his revenge plot against the entire Zabi family for the murder of his father. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Hmm.
Hmm.
I
Yep.
mean, no, I like his vengeance against the Zabi family is well known and should be no spoiler to
Hmm.
anyone even slightly familiar with Gundam. But it's
Yes.
like I came in like the first Gundam series I ever saw was Double O, and then
Hmm.
Wing, and then it's like I still haven't gone back on the original Gundams. But the thing is that like they're releasing these new movies that I've been watching, the
Hmm.
remasters of the first season and before, and it's just been oh top tier.
Oh, Gundam the Origin. Oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Oh
Then
yeah.
they're airing the English dubs on Toonami now.
Oh,
So
I didn't know the
yeah,
dubs were out.
yeah. Last night they aired episode 6,
Oh,
and I think I think that's the point where uh, Char acquires that name.
hmm
Boy, he did that guy dirty. Uh,
he did. He really
oh,
did.
he did that guy dirty so bad. Got into the Zeon Military Academy, made friends with Garma, and I don't recall if that's the episode where one guy who recognizes who he really is gives Char the first version of his iconic half mask. and then sets that guy up to be killed in combat.
It's like, what's your motivation? Vengeance, and nothing will stop me. All right, friend, I could certainly trust you. It's sometimes that stuff bothers me. Just like when everyone's
Yeah.
a little bit trusting, a little bit
Mm-hmm.
like, what's your purpose? Vengeance. Oh, I could follow this guy. It's like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm on record as saying Dashing Jack is my char, and it's how I depict him, and it's the name of this battleship, Redolin's Revenge. That will come up.
oh,
That will
I
come
hope
up over the
so.
course of the series. Um, Now, the other thing that's coming in book 2 is that we get to see our mastermind in action again. Um,
Excellent.
because he realized because he can't rely on Red Eyes to provide a lot of the manpower. In fact, that's another subplot that sets up stuff that happens in book 3. Um, he has to take the field, but he can't do it the way he did in Reavers. He can't,
Right.
because there's no way for him to make certain there are no witnesses. So he has to do the same sort of thing that Jack does, which is he has to assume another identity. And now we know why he is referred to as Master. We get to learn what his alter ego is, and why Red Eyes why Azazel and is making all of these mecha for Red Eyes that are Mesopotamian themed. Yeah.
Mm.
And it's not just Azazel who does this. It's actually our mastermind. Um, and this plays into one of my ongoing themes with the book, which is that people get things wrong sometimes, and when they act on wrong information, however trivial, it can have knock-on effects. So he's trying to recreate the Tower of Babel. Yeah, that's our fool's errand here.
Hmm.
And he mistakenly links the Tower of Babel with the Babylonian Empire. Not Yeah, that's why that honestly, it's him making a mistake.
Right.
And him making a mistake. Um and so that's why his the catchphrase is victory for Babylon, because his ultimate goal is to not only literally rebuild the tower, but to figuratively rebuild what the Tower of Babel represented. At least he got that part right,
Yeah.
which is to bring all the nations together, make them into one nation, literally one nation, which means they all look alike, they all speak the same language, share the same
Hmm.
culture. And rather than take like several generations to do it the old-fashioned way, that's one of the things he's got Azazel working on, is how to do it quick. And Azazel's like, okay, well, sure, I'll get right on that.
I am evil
Meanwhile,
and amoral.
mhm. And Azazel has, by the end of book 2, Azazel's got has figured out part of the process, um, because Red Eyes has already rebuilt all the ships in Mecca he's lost, and this is 3 months after the end of book 1.
Hmm.
He's already rebuilt it all because the manufacturing capabilities of Hell's Heart have been repaired and restored. And furthermore, despite losing the battle, the fact that some wannabe pirate king successfully raided a populated planet and managed to put this, put this put the fear of God, for lack of a better term, into into all of these nobles and into the church, managed to attract a lot of people to his banner,
Of
and
course.
they're starting to feed him, to feed him stuff, things that he needs that he can't produce fast enough or on his own. So he's quickly building up the fleet, but he doesn't have the crews. And Azazel's figured out a stopgap method to fill the gap. Um, it doesn't involve growing his own yet, but he's got a necessary step to that goal, which is okay. You've got these clones. You want them to come out of. You want to decant them and immediately put them into action.
Right.
Um, how do you do that? Well, you have to train them while they're in the tank, and that means de facto brainwashing. So
Right.
what the plot in book two is that a lot of and this is going to come up and throw in early on, is that people Roland's been talking to, because he can't just concentrate on this one thing. He's got other things to keep an eye on.
Right.
Have been you know tell him that there have been orphanages have been taking in far more revenue than they actually spend. Where does
Oh
it go? Oh
no.
my God. you know
Right.
and
Right.
yeah, so you have or a lot of orphans and other people who are not immediately missed are being grabbed, trafficked, sent to this fallen angel, and basically uh, having their minds wiped and written over, not quite in the style of MK Ultra, but applying a lot of the same principles.
Mm.
So, and then they come out, and then they act on these new false personas, these new identities. Essentially, they're new people, but they're very crude archetypes.
Right.
They're very crude archetypes with very simple psychologies, and therefore they tend to be used for a lot of grunt work.
Right.
So if you want to know who the poor bastard is in the Goblin, starting in late book two, or manning all of the various fleets, the pirate fleets. It's early on. It's going to be these poor suckers.
Mm.
Um, this eventually does escalate. This will escalate over the course of the series as Azazel figures out more steps to being able to just flat out clone people,
Right.
and from making copies of people, he eventually goes to what is his goal, which is to recreate the Nephilim, and you know,
I like
and
it. I know. I genuinely like it.
mhm. And the only reason the mastermind will allow this is because he has a plan for the use of at least the first round of reborn Nephilim, and that's to act as his military vanguard for when he finally makes his coup against the Solar Guard.
Outstanding.
Mm-hmm.
I myself have been dabbling with Nephilim, with a series of typical churchman, except Protestant this time.
Yeah.
Doing things, and he puts a vampire at bay, and the vampire resurrects a giant from the La Brea tar pits, who just
Mm-hmm.
happens to be a Nephilim, and of course he's evil because. Nephilims are somewhere on the evil spectrum, being the children of fallen angels. Um, eh, According to the ones, I don't know. I'm not into the various mystic groups. I just take the simple. I'm a simple Bible man, you see. Um, and the guy's like, "Oh, we're gonna do evil. I'm in on it. Don't you want to hear about it? Okay. If you want to tell me your evil plan." And then
Hmm.
there's this fight scene with the hero that still ends with the vampire's death, of course, because this is a heroic, superversive story, like your own is, not some subversive, Drek as we are in rebellion against. Um,
Hmm.
but that's like I'm pleased to see Nephilim and other spiritual things start to show up more and more as villains, as parts of tales, and not just swept under the rug as superstitious nonsense.
Just reading this, the stuff that's alleged to be true about the Nephilim is
Hmm.
fantastic reading.
Oh
Whether you're talking
yes.
about the ancient sources or the more contemporary people who are like, who, God, my favorite one is the guy who claims to have been Army Special Forces in Afghanistan, who uh, encountered a Nephilim giant while on a long range patrol in the mountains. Um, and his entire squad lit this guy up with light machine gun fire, and for like a good couple of minutes before he went down. And this giant already, speared one guy, killed another by throwing him
Yeah.
around like a rag doll, before he finally fell over. And then they took the carcass. They actually radioed it in, allegedly, and took the carcass away. God, was trying to, yeah. Look up Steve Quayle on YouTube. He's yeah, he puts out this story, and he's one of the guys who's big into the Genesis 6, giants thing, and all about the Nephilim. And L.A. Marzulli is the other guy.
Mm.
They talk a lot. They talk a lot, and they sell a lot of merch related to it. Um, this is not an endorsement. I don't say I'm not saying that they're telling the truth. I'm saying that their tales are entertaining.
I always love the ones where people discover caves with giant skeletons in them, 18
Mm,
feet tall, one
yeah.
eyed. And then it's like, guys, we're closing down the park. There's some safety issues. More mountain lions than usual can't go in. And then it's like they return to the cave and they're all gone. And it's like, ho, ho, ho.
Yep, I've heard that one too. The
Yep.
I and I've heard that, I've heard this, all the stories about how the Smithsonian is run by, pick your favorite evil conspiracy, you know and deliberately suppresses the truth about the giants and all of this. um yeah, you've hit critical mass on awareness when the History Channel throws you a bone every once in a
Right.
while. um
There's this great old comic of conspiracy theories, the usual alien abduction, alien had my baby, and that's where I first came across them, and ever since then, they're like my favorite, like second tier uh, theory out there. Um,
mhm.
there's also a whole I don't know how like I enjoy history very much. I'm sure you do too. I always also love the when they discover things from like 12,000 years ago, and it's like what happened, and like this and that. Well, the ice age ended and everything got flooded. Ah, or
Oh
whatever
god.
they like to say, of du jour.
Hmm. Yeah, Graham Hancock is your man, but for
I
anything
love
about
him so
12,000
much.
years ago. Oh yes, he's fantastic. It doesn't matter if you believe him or not. He is just very, very good at presenting his position on the end
Hmm.
of that end of that era. Yeah.
I've got
And
his what is it called? Fingerprints of the Gods somewhere in
uh-huh.
my library. I can't see it from where I'm sitting, but I know I've got that huge tome in there. And it's like low key, I do just keep an eye out for anything he produces. He's gone a little bit drug related recently, but I'm just waiting for a return to form.
Yeah. Eric von Daniken's, is the man for all things ancient aliens. It's yeah, Giorgio Tsoukalos. The guy seems like he'd be a lot of fun to pal around with, but
Oh yeah.
uh that the magazine he's said to be the publisher of hasn't put out an issue in years.
Right. He's
Yeah.
he's he's really just skimming for those sweet History Channel
Oh
blocks.
God, yes.
But
He's like first on the he's the first one to pick up the phone. To pick up the phone when they call. God, the man has managed to fly around the world on their dime, and it's
right.
great.
And it's like oh, those guys they pull up. It's like one guy they're doing the Bermuda Triangle, and like I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
hold on, Dad, we're gonna see a guy. He's gonna be serious. He's gonna have the turtleneck. He's gonna have this, that, and the other. And he shows up, and he looks like like he has the turtleneck. He has the serious look. He has the flock of seagulls haircut. He's perfect at presenting who he is supposed to be. This random Bermuda Triangle guy, and it's like, ha,
Mm-hmm.
beautiful.
Yeah. No, conspiracy theory makes for fantastic fiction. Just ask
Oh
Declan Finn.
yes.
Um,
Oh yes. And it's like even if you've got like your own little personal crazy, like just turning it into a story works out entirely.
mm-hmm. Yeah. No, from my part, I use the Nephilim stuff because, uh, you know, it it's actually kind of weird how decided to go with it. Um, I was up late one night on a Saturday night after after the Toonami block,
Mhm.
and they were airing Attack on Titan at the time. And I had come across I was watching one of the Steve Quayle uh, giant videos, and I'm it's I'm reading about how no I'm well the video's playing. He's talking about how the giants of old were running around and eventually we started eating everything. I'm going, wait a minute, no. So, and which leads me to say, to my knowledge, the man behind Attack on Titan isn't even aware isn't aware of the whole Nephilim thing, as far as I know.
Well, I
He
don't
just
know.
thought it was a good idea.
I don't
Um,
I don't know if you can say that just because like Japan will like
they
randomly
they
take something and it'll
I
show up
know.
like what is it? Araki in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure has that one thing where people say that Jesus Christ came over to the Americas for a bit.
Hmm.
And he shows up as this corpse that everyone's fighting over because it gives them wacky, crazy superpowers. Um, so it's like
Yeah,
you say
yeah,
that,
yeah. It's not impossible, but I just haven't seen anything definitive. Let's put it
yes,
that way.
okay,
I wouldn't. It wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me at all, especially considering,
hmm
um, exactly what prerequisites there are to become a Titan. Um, it's like I'm go as soon as I'm a spoiler junkie. I have been since I was a teenager, so of course I hit the Attack on Titan wikis and and read up well
hmm
ahead of where the anime is. And so yeah, I know all about the requirement for what it takes to become a Titan. Um,
hmm
and I'm going, no, no, come on.
Come on.
If if this guy does not know, then it is the most incredible example of you know of
hmm
a convert what's the word convergent theory or whatever it is
Yeah.
that I've seen in quite some time. Uh,
It's
because you know
yeah.
because according to all the according to the folks in Crazy Town, you know there are the bloodline of the giants still exists diffused throughout the human population in theory, and I am running with that because because it gives me a reason for certain characters, some of whom haven't shown up yet in the books, to do what they do and believe what they believe. Um,
hmm
yeah, the The other thing that the other thing that that I've really enjoyed is when I decided I wanted to do this, and um I said, I said that, yeah, I want to be the first guy to get into Super Robot Wars. Um the first Westerner, I should say, to get into Super Robot Wars. The that was a half of a joke. It wasn't entirely serious because you know I, getting in being a foreigner trying to get into a Japanese franchise is kind of like pulling teeth. Um,
Yeah.
especially when you're not already world famous. So yeah, and I said, yeah, I could probably make a pitch in 2 years. That realistically, I figured it would be closer to five, but that's probably going to be the case. But and here's our nice little hope spot on about this. The team behind the international series of Super Net Robot Wars releases are increasingly broadening what they will consider for inclusion. Um, right now, they're including series that have no that are not known for their giant robots.
Mm.
The first of them was Space Battleship Yamato, the 2199 version, um, which didn't add any giant robots until the follow-up series 2202. That when they added some real robots. Um,
I never got that far into the Space Battleship Yamato series.
yeah, well, 2202, I don't think is, I don't recall if it's done yet in Japan or not. I've only seen like the first couple of episodes, and
Mm.
yeah, both the new alien threat, which is the Comet Empire. It's a remake of the Comet Empire arc from the 70s.
Okay.
And the Comet Empire has their real robots, which fire these like 3 meter long triangular shaped rods, rods at opponents. They're you first see them used in anti personnel duties,
Duh.
and yeah, that's messy. They're good. You can easily take out tanks with those things.
Right.
Uh, and the answer from the United Nations Cosmo Navy seems to be some kind of they're too big to be called power armor, but they're not a giant robot. It's not Gundam sized. It's closer to anybody who's seen Armor Trooper Votons will probably recognize it, or have ever played Heavy Gear, or remember remember anything else similar. It's
I
they're about
remember Heavy Gear.
yeah,
I also remember
it's
that
about they're about
show they
that
had.
big.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're about that big. Um,
Huh.
let's see. Super Robot Wars V it included Nadia Secret of Blue Water, which is known for the battleship. There are no giant robots,
Mm-hmm.
um, as such. Um, yeah, and then the most recent one, T, is includes Arcadia of My Youth, Arcadia of My Youth, e- Eternal Orbits SX, SSX. So yeah, that's the iconic space pirate of anime, and his battleship is the big reason there. And that's a series that is not known for giant robots at all.
Yeah,
Not any incarnation of Harlock is big on the giant robots.
that's
Yeah.
true. They always go
So,
for more one-on-one fights or fleet fights, or
mm-hmm.
like boarding the battleship kind of things. And
Yep.
I saw the new CGI one a couple years back, and I was very satisfied with everything they put out there.
Oh yeah,
Um,
that was pretty good.
like
That was a
like
pretty good take.
oh yeah, like I wanted to point out that it's like, how do you like you want to have that action girl? How do you do it? Well, you put her in power armor and then make her a kung fu master.
Mm-hmm.
So you can get away with having that sort of thing and not have like the realism people get mad at you.
Yeah. Yeah, power armor tends to be a nice equalizer.
Mhm.
without without tripping too many alarms.
Right.
Um, yeah, and let's see the no the other thing that I didn't intend on when I started writing Star Night, but ended up becoming a thing is the importance of music as an expression of culture. Um,
Mhm.
it's not the same. It's not the same note that say the Macross franchise takes on the matter, where it
Yeah.
goes from that really just warped into
That's just
yeah.
soundtracks for battle. Like, it's not like I watched Macross
Hmm.
Frontier, I watched the original Macross thing, not the original one, sorry, the new Macross thing they did a couple years ago. Song's
Yeah,
great.
Delta.
Delta, I've got a couple of them on my phone. I skip most of
Hmm.
them, unless I'm feeling it. But it's like it's not the same thing as what you did, which I appreciated a lot. Like if you're gonna have singing and fairy tales or even like high culture, you must have songs somewhere.
Hmm. And um, you know, I make no bones about you know who Gabriella Robin refers to, who she's inspired by, or anything like that. It's Yoko Kano, the living goddess of music, Yoko Kano.
Mm,
Uh, and the with book two, um, I'm not entirely certain how I'm going to do it yet, but I'm gonna. I want to have her, to have her still be that, be the culture heroine,
mhm,
kind of princess. It's just that she gets to show that she's still more than a pretty face in the plot. Um, and one of the things that you know one of the things I've decided on as a kind of a recurring gag is that she has a yacht. It's actually it's implied to be there in book one. It's how she got to Edinburgh,
mhm,
but it's not named. Um, she has a personal starship. It's a yacht, and it's called Loveheart. And she will go through several incarnations of Loveheart over the series because unfortunately it keeps getting it keeps getting wrecked, and
mhm.
poor Loveheart Mark One is going to get wrecked in book two. Um,
Outstanding.
yeah, not because she's not incompetent. She's actually she gets to show her chops again, because she's going to be at the controls. And the only reason it gets wrecked is because superior opposition forces her to crash land. Um, but but it's a crash landing that she and the other occupants of the yacht are able to escape from. So what does that imply right there? One, she knows how to fly. Two, she knows how to handle a combat situation. Three,
Mhm.
she doesn't panic under stress. Four, she's competent enough to put down a fatally damaged vessel and get away. Um,
Mhm.
you know, Again, you don't have to be a masculine action girl to be to be an effective heroine.
Yep.
You can be feminine and still be a respectable female lead. You don't have to be don't have to be a combat expert either. Gabriella knows how to shoot. She doesn't mean she knows how to handle herself in a firefight.
Right.
um yeah.
It's like there's a big difference between what's essentially high level songstress
Hmm.
and somebody who's an actual trained soldier or piratess or whatever you want to call it, um, who's lived an entire life dedicated to combat and all that warful stuff.
Hmm. So she's a noble woman, so she's everything she knows about fighting and weapons is this is what you do this is what you do to get away from danger.
Mhm.
And it, with the implied with the implication that it's not her primary job, and at least not at this time. It changes down the line when she becomes basically when she gets the mama bear talk.
Mhm.
um and she's not the only one in that scene who can do anything about it. And that scene's going to come up because that scene exists. That entire chase sequence with Gabriella at the controls exists because the other one of the other characters in the yacht is actually Cretan. And Cretan's the one who who needs to be there because there is a similar chase scene that happens in his standalone story that I'm going to write somewhere after the next few books, where that the one that's going to be base where I'm going to take the siege of Vienna from 1683 as my basis.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yep, that one's happening. And that's one of the stories where Cretan is out and out the protagonist, and he is the protagonist. He is the hero. Roland doesn't appear much at all. Gabriella is there in a supporting in a supporting capacity, but she's not on site.
Mhm.
And the mood is very different. The story right now is called The Tragedy of Lady Olga. Um, and the reason I'm doing all of this work with Cretan is because that story is going to be the moment where the defining moment of his life occurs.
Ooh.
Yeah. Um when at that point he's 16 years old. So this is 6 years from where he currently
Mhm.
and he is sent to what is now Lady Olga's homeworld. At this point, Lady Olga has married has married into another noble family,
Right.
and um, Cretan is sent there to, I forget exactly why he's sent there. What he's sent, either to deliver something or to pick up something. I forget which. Um, because the big galaxy spanning war is still going on, and Roland can't do it himself, and the comms can't be used for what are considered trivial matters at that point. So
Mhm.
Cretan has to take poor old Loveheart, which is an unarmed yacht. I think this is Mark IV at the time, Mark III or Mark IV. He arrives just as the enemy fleet arrives at New Vienna to lay siege and
Right,
gets
right.
shot down.
Listen,
He
I
gets
want you to
shot.
take a lot of care of this ship. It's the fourth ship I've been to. Of course I will. It shows up out of hyperspace. But you, oh no. Listen, Gabriella,
And,
I'll get you a new ship. I'm sorry.
but he's trapped on this planet for about 2 months, and if not for the fact that he manages to get the word out just before he's shot down, the enemy fleet would have successfully cut off all communications, and
Mhm.
nobody would have known the siege would have happened until it was too late.
Right, right.
Uh, as it was, and then using the actual historical events as a guide, and the key players within it. Um, what eventually happens is that the over the course of those 2 months, Lady Olga's basically forced to take up the defense because all of the men in her family are killed,
Right, right.
and and the only other symbol of hope they've got is this boy who is the squire to one of the 12 Star Knights, who manages to acquit himself as best he can. You know,
Right.
if you've been fighting more or less on a regular basis for, for the last 6 years of your life, you're going to be pretty good. You're also going to have some issues. And Cretan's coming in to this with a number of them not exactly on display, but by the time he reaches the point where the titular tragedy occurs, it just, he finally has had enough. And it's not not so much a break the whoopee moment as it is a this is the moment where he has to choose. Does he submit? Does he submit to despair, or does he rise to the challenge? And
And we'll have
what
to
I've
see
been
it when we
uh-huh.
read your book. Now, we've been
Yeah.
chatting for an hour, Bradford, and
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, I have 1,000 different other things on my to-do list today. Not really, I'm being hyperbolic. But let's have some final words from you about Star Knight and your future projects.
Okay. At this time, the at this time, uh the Kindle version of Readers of the Void is still available on Amazon for at $2.99. I will, um, for a guy with absolutely zero to spend on advertising, I'm doing about what I expected, which is pretty good. The paperback version I wanted to get out this month, but it's going to have to be come out in September because of cash flow issues on my end. Uh, I was hospitalized earlier this year. Some of that, some of the money I had reserved for business operations had to be diverted, and I have to wait for the first round of royalty payments before I can get around to sending some paperbacks out to people who backed it at that level.
Mm-hmm.
Book two, I want to get out the by the end of this year. It depends on whether or not I have, I whether or not I can get a finished manuscript out in time. Paperback is looking dodgy at this point for end of year. Maybe early, before spring next year is probably more likely. I'm sorry to everybody who wanted it sooner, but them's the breaks.
I'll be happy to buy it when it comes out.
And I will probably, I I probably will, I will probably want to do some kind of crowdfunding before the end of the year to make certain that books 3 and 4 get out faster.
Mm.
Um,
I mean, like nobody can really blame you for out of the blue medical problems,
yeah.
but it is, not that I'm talking to you specifically, but it is a symptom of the crowdfunding, sort of sphere that quite a few people don't deliver on time. Brian Niemeyer, he delivers on time. You were on track for it. Other people were on track for it. I know Benjamin Chia has been really cranking them out. I actually just saw the cover for his third book in his Dungeon Samurai series, which I can recommend to people who like isekai, kind of thoughtful chess piece sort of thing going, but it wasn't my cup of tea. Even though I really do like Benjamin Chia and I think he does great work. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
just like I'm enjoying Star Knight, I'm enjoying Brian Niemeyer's thing. I myself have a fantasy book out called Tears of Elfland about 7 kids going into the forest to deal with their emotional issues. There will be a link below. And you can always check out Superversive Press's stock, as well as we do link to things other people do. Quite often, I myself am trying to like if only my job would remain static for more than 2 months, I could start working on videos and stuff like that again.
Mm-hmm.
But I did enjoy Star Knight Saga. I can recommend it to people who want a quick, great jaunt. And let me tell you, the duels in that book are absolutely top tier. You hit what you set out to hit, which is more than a lot of authors can say when they talk to me about what they're trying to do.
Yeah. I don't. I make no pretension of being literary. I don't care about being well regarded by the litfic crowd. I want to entertain the way the pulps entertained, and that
Mhm,
means I try to focus on good storytelling, on a fast on a fast paced tale that
mhm.
is. And as Dornall on Geek Gab said, I try to be clear. I do my very best to be clear so that when you read what I write, even if I do bust out the big words, you're not going to be confused.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely. And I can say that with your fight scenes, as grand as they were, like with the sniper duel with the warehouse in between the two mecha, I could never say that I didn't quite know where everyone was. Um, the only thing that surprised me, I'll admit to you, was when Cretan went berserk. I wasn't expecting that, but I didn't like it at first. But in retrospect, as I've been thinking about the scenes, because again, I'm a little thief here. It made not sense because it did. I didn't really expect it, but I have liked it more on the thinking back on it on the reread than I did the first time out. But then again, that's how I was for Kill Team in the Galaxy's Edge series as well. Um, yeah, you sound
well,
like you want to say something.
if for if everybody who all of you who really enjoyed Star Knight, there are some things that are coming in book two. Dashing Jack gets a new ride.
Ooh,
Yep.
ooh,
Um.
I did like
Yep.
Dashing Jack.
Yep. He gets a new ride. To replace the unit he lost in Reavers. Um. And we get to see some new models, some smaller models, and our first transformable shows up.
Ooh,
It shows up, in book two, midway through. It's going to be the climax of Act Two, is where the first transformable arrives, and you get to see some interesting uses of technology that have been implied, but not yet acted upon, and they're going to be key to how our hero manages to pull off some of his stunts.
mm.
Hmm.
Well,
Not
mm,
Yeah, not very. And they're not very big. We're not talking like how he uses a starship. We're talking about smaller technologies, but nonetheless very obvious. And once you see how they're used,
mm.
because I had to review some of my notes to make certain I was being consistent. And yeah, this will be very very fun because how the hero manages to pull off his stunt, his plan against our villain is going to be fun for you to read.
And I can't wait. Uh, guys, do pick up Reavers of the Void Star Knight Saga Book 1 and any future releases by Bradford Walker. Do check out Tears of Elfland and anything by Superversive Press. We do put a lot of effort and love into our books. Have a great one.